again because of the stall. I'm trying to finish by the time that we agreed on, so I'm going to skip some of this. And so I'm just going to state the main result. Sorry?
We can continue after this.
Yeah, but they have to go to class, right? So I don't want to, the students have to disappear. I don't want to hold them up. So, don't worry, I won't leave out too much. Okay? I'm going to settle down for now. Everything went completely haywire, so let me just state this. I'm going to slow down. So to state the main result of this section of the talk, okay, and I don't think we'll need all the details there, so let me try and see how much I can do. Okay? Recall the measure of the Gini coefficient. So the Gini coefficient is what I had written down just before the lights went out. Okay? That's the first expression. Recall the measure of fractionalization, which is what I wrote down right at the beginning of the talk. And it looks exactly like the Gini. Everybody alive? Measure the Gini coefficient, G, and fractionalization is exactly like the Gini, except that these distances over here between groups are just 0 and 1. If you're the same group, your distance is 0. Okay? And if you're a different group, the distance is 1. Then you can derive F. And this is, my friend, the polarization index, which I derived for you before the lights went out, okay? Which is the Ni squared Nj times the distance. So these are the three main characters in the story that I've been trying so far unsuccessfully to tell, right? And this guy, F over here, was, remember, the one which was uncorrelated with conflict, statistically. Okay. And forget about the top of that slide. Just concentrate on the result below on theorem 4, which is the following: that in this model that I have given you a very hazy outline of, okay, it turns out that equilibrium conflict, which is measured by all the resources put into the system by all the different groups, is a convex combination of 4 numbers. Sorry, it's a linear combination of 4 numbers. An intercept term omega 1 plus a weight on the Gini coefficient plus another weight on the polarization index plus another weight on the fractionalization index. And I'll tell you a little bit about the weights in a minute. Now, let me explain to you what this is unimportant. Let me explain to you what this means and what that means. Lambda over here is the percentage of the prize that is spent by the group on public goods. So let me explain by that what this is. Let's suppose there is an ideological war. Okay? An ideological war, by that I mean, let's say, a religious war. Hindu supremacy versus Muslim supremacy in the society. Then in some sense, the entire prize is a public good. It's public because you're fighting for a particular ideology. In that case, lambda is 1. Lambda is the value 1. Contrast that with the case of an economic war with private goods, where you're trying to seize oil resources. Okay? When you're trying to seize oil resources, then the budget can be divided up among the winners of that conflict, and that is 1 minus lambda. And the result says that conflict in this society is a combination of these different objects, but I'm going to make things simpler here, is that when the population is large, all these other terms go away. Okay? All these other terms vanish. The omega 1 vanishes, omega 2 vanishes, and conflict becomes entirely proportional to a convex combination of the polarization index and the fractionalization index. Now, I would have loved to have a little bit more time to tell you about how you actually get this result, because it gives you some insight into how these indices work. Okay? But since I don't have that, all I want to do is to point out to you the fact that polarization becomes more important in this theory the more the prize is public. Fractionalization becomes more important in this theory the more the prize is private. Okay? And that's what the theory actually tells you. And what's the intuition behind that? The intuition behind that is that when the price is entirely private, then all that matters is the amount of money coming to you when you win a particular conflict. There is no sense of group identity which is involved in any such conflict. Because all that is involved is money. That's it. When the prize is public, then what matters to you is the emergence of a particular group identity. I'm just trying to translate the mathematics into a particular intuition that we can understand. And therefore, when the prize becomes more and more public, polarization matters more. When the prize becomes more and more private, fractionalization matters. Now, this is not to say that all economic prizes are private. There could be many economic prizes. For example, the battle over public education versus private education, or public health provision versus private health provision, or the battle behind over protecting a domestic economy versus opening it up to liberalization and globalization. Okay? These are all economic motives, okay? And yet the prizes in these cases are all public goods, right? Because when you adopt a particular policy, let's say of protection or opening up the economy to globalization, it affects everybody at the same time. Okay. And so it turns out here that when the population is large, only fractionalization and polarization matter in the sense that So I'm going to leave out these approximation results here, and I'm going to go straight into the empirical analysis. So can I take 10 more minutes? Is that good? Okay, so I want to talk about very quickly the empirical investigation, which is based on the work by Montalvo and Reynal. Okay? So now we want to see if when we take it actually to the data, whether this measure talks or not. Okay? So that's my polarization measure, okay? And that's the fragmentation that we talk about. Now, the difference between these two things, I was talking all this time from a theoretical perspective, but I want to show you that empirically it matters a great deal also. And what I've drawn in this diagram, actually I've taken this from Montalvo and Reynal, is on the horizontal axis is measured the ethnic polarization of many different countries. Each dot is a country. Okay? And on the vertical axis is measured the ethnic fractionalization of many different countries. Okay? And you see that there is no simple correlation between these two cases, empirically, not just theoretically. So the countries can have the same polarization and be highly fractionalized or very little fractionalized. So as an example, if you look at Guatemala or Sierra Leone, ethnic polarization is high, but ethnic fractionalization is low. Guatemala has only very two strong ethnic groups, so the fractionalization is very low, but polarization is high. In countries like Nigeria or in areas like Bosnia, religious polarization is high, but religious fractionalization is low. I don't know exactly whether it is commonly accepted what the fractions of different ethnic groups are in Turkey, okay? But probably, let's say if you go by 55 million ethnic Turks, 12 million Kurds, and then a bunch of other smaller ethnic groups, you can actually sit down and calculate the extent of ethnic polarization in Turkey and the ethnic fractionalization in Turkey, if you believe the numbers. And I know that the numbers are mentioned. So what Reynal and Montalvo do is they look at the binary case, where if you and I are in a different group, the distance is 1. And if you and I are in the same group, the distance is 2. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you very quickly about this new regression that Montalvo and Reynal run. So they look at 138 countries over 1960 to 1999. And their dependent variable, just like in the other studies I talked about before, is the incidence of a civil war over a 5-year period. And the explanatory variables are the same as before, except now we're going to put in indices of polarization rather than fractionalization. So just to give you a very quick background, just to calibrate, suppose you run a logit of war, of civil war of ethnic fractionalization. Okay? So you put it on the right-hand side, ethnic fractionalization, per capita GDP, and an intercept term. It's significant. It does matter. Okay? But as soon as you start putting in any controls, like population, the significance disappears. Okay? So the first term over there, in parentheses, these are T statistics, and the T statistic completely vanishes. Okay? Once you put in population as a control. You put in more controls, it stays gone. The ethnic fractionalization doesn't matter at all. It's insignificant from conflict. And this is the full set of controls over here. And as you see, when you put it in, ethnic fractionalization is completely immaterial. This is the result that we found before. I'm just repeating it. Now, if you do the same thing using ethnic polarization, okay, so you put in ethnic polarization and run the same set of regressions, it starts off again as significant. Okay? But this time, when you add controls, it stays significant. So it stays positive and significant for conflict, even when you add in the full set of controls. Okay? So ethnic polarization seems to have a strong correlation with conflict, and it's something that you do not see with ethnic fractionalization. Now, it's not only significant, but the effect is very big. Okay? So if you raise polarization from the average level, which is, let's say, 0.51, okay, in the sample, right, to the Nigerian level, the predicted probability of conflict doubles in this model, okay, in this empirical exercise. So the effect is actually quite strong relative to fractionalization. And you can actually try the same logic with religious variables as well, and it also, again, religious fractionalization becomes insignificant once you put in controls. If you do it with religious polarization, the effect is not as strong, but with the full set of controls, it could be useful. So these observations, it turns out, are robust to several different specifications. And I won't go into the specifications for lack of time, but ethnic polarization turns out to be significant when it's entered into the same regression as fractionalization, and the latter is not. Okay? So it's really a very strong effect that happens. Let me leave this out. And so let me come to the very last part of my talk. And I just want to say a little bit about the last part of my talk, because it relies on my recent work. So this discussion so far really feeds back to questions about ethnicity. Right? If we believe that economics drives conflict, as I strongly believe, okay,